Good afternoon, Facebook Live viewers. My name is Caitlin and this is Derek, and we are coming to you today from the Resource Room here in the Education Center at the Kansas City Zoo. Derek, what is the Resource Room?
Well, Kate, the Resource Room is a place where we house all of our biofacts. Basically, we have bones, skulls, pelts, feathers, and fur.
And what actually is a biofact and what do we use them for?
Well, Kate, a biofact is a material that comes from animals that we use to educate the public about these animals. So it can help us teach people about them as well as to teach us about the animals that they came from.
That's an interesting last portion that you said there, because I know that we do use a lot of different biofacts for identification purposes to help us figure out what type of animal we're actually looking at. So today we're going to learn a little bit about skulls and how to identify what type of animal it's come from. So morphology is the study of the parts of an animal, and today we're going to look a little bit more in depth on skulls. So there are three main facets that we're going to use to help us ID what specific animal we're looking at when we see a skull. The first one is going to deal with its eyes.
So taking a look here at this skull, we can notice that the orbitals or the eye sockets are placed in the front of the skull. This is going to indicate that this animal likes to hunt. It's a predator, so it needs to have depth perception in order to catch its food. It gains that depth perception from having a slight overlap in the field of vision between these two eyes. It needs to have that in order to be able to catch its food. Taking a look at a different animal, a prey animal, we notice that the orbitals are located on the sides of the skull. This allows the animal to have greater width of vision, so it can see further around itself, but it lacks that depth perception that the predator species has. A good way to keep this in mind is that eyes in the front, it likes to hunt. Eyes on the side, it's gonna wanna hide.
The second one, which you're probably not going to use often, is where the foramen magnum is located. So that is the hole that is on the back of the skull where the spine would usually connect to. Any hole that is toward the bottom of the skull is going to indicate that that animal probably walked upright. So the one that Derek has in his hand right now is from a chimp. We know that chimps are going to walk a little bit more upright. The one that he's going to pull out now, which is a Tasmanian devil, has that foramen magnum a little bit higher up, which means that that animal probably walked on all fours. And then the third and final, and probably the most important, is going to be dentation.
So dentation, or teeth, is going to be really important in IDing these skulls. So here in the front we have our incisors. These are going to be used for cutting and gnawing food, followed by our canines, which are used for piercing or sometimes for self-defense. And then lastly, we have our premolars and our molars. These are going to be used for grinding up food.
So now that we have a little bit of an idea of what dentation looks like, let's take a look at some more skulls to figure out what those animals eat. Teeth come in all shapes and sizes, and they help an animal eat specific foods. So in front of me right now, I have three specific lower jaws from different animals that eat different types of food. The first one that we're going to look at is this big one right in the middle. So this is an animal that has a ton of flat premolars and molars in the back. They don't really have those front canines that we talked about with animals that are going to probably eat more along the lines of meat. And they do have some flat incisors at the front, probably for grasping specific food. So an animal that has a ton of flat premolars and molars in the back is probably going to be an herbivore. So an herbivore is going to be an animal that eats plants, allows them to grind and chew on whatever type of food that they are going to be eating. The second one we're going to look at is much different. This one hardly has any flat premolars or molars in the back. In fact, they're pretty sharp. And now we can actually see some pretty prominent canines at the bottom and some sharp incisors at the front. You're probably already guessing what this might belong to. It is a carnivore, so an animal that is going to primarily eat meat. And in the middle, one that does a little bit of both, much like us, is going to be an omnivore. So it has those incisors in the front for grasping food. It has canines, not very prominent, but they're there. And then it has sharper premolars and molars in the back for grinding. So it can eat a little bit of everything. So looking at these three mandibles, you can probably start to guess how you can ID animals using specific teeth structures. Let's put your knowledge to the test and actually have you guess on a couple of skulls we'll bring out.
All right, now that we've learned a little bit about dentition, we're gonna take a look here at these animal skulls and see if we can identify if they're a carnivore, an herbivore, or an omnivore. So here with our first skull, we can see that it's got some prominent canine teeth, followed with some pretty sharp premolars and molars. There are some incisors here in the front, but they don't seem to be too prominent for the dentition of the animal as a whole. So they probably don't use those incisors a whole lot. Which animal do you think this is? Do you think it's a carnivore, an herbivore, or an omnivore? If you guessed carnivore, you'd be correct. This is a carnivore. We can tell it's a carnivore because of these really prominent canine teeth. It means it's gonna be used for piercing its food and kind of making the kill. All right, our next skull here, we're gonna take a look at, is right next to me. Do we think that this animal is an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? Here we can see that it's got some pretty pronounced incisors. I don't see too pronounced of canines, if the prevalence of them at all. And then I see a large row of premolars and molars. So that means that this animal probably does a lot of grinding and crushing with its food. So taking your best guess, do you think this animal is gonna be an omnivore, a carnivore, or an herbivore? If you guessed herbivore, you'd be correct. Here we have a zebra. So this animal is not native to Missouri, but it might be closely related to a deer or a horse. Moving on from this skull to our next skull, we're gonna take a look at. We're gonna guess if this is an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore. Here we can see that there's some pretty pronounced incisors as well as some canine teeth. Taking a look back here, we also have the presence of some premolars and molars that seem to be pretty prominent as well. So, using your best guess, do you think this animal is a herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? If you guessed an omnivore, you'd be correct. Here we have a raccoon. This is an opportunistic animal, meaning it feeds on a wide variety of different foods. So it needs to have the presence of those different variety of teeth in order to help it to eat those different kinds of foods. All right, and then lastly, we're gonna move on to this skull here. This is very unique in the sense that this animal's got some very prominent incisors. We also have the lack of canine teeth and the prominence of these molars in the back. So this is actually a rodent skull. This is from a beaver. So beavers are herbivores, whereas a lot of rodents are actually omnivores. Taking a look here at these teeth on the front, these really prominent incisors, we notice just firsthand is that how orange they are. They're orange because of the prevalence of iron in their enamel. Because there's iron in there, it makes the outside really hard, but the inside is soft. Because the outside is harder than the inside, these teeth self-sharpen whenever they bite down. This is really important for keeping their teeth sharp so that they're able to chew on their foods and especially tough things like trees that they're trying to get down. Along with this, it's really important for them to constantly be chewing on things because their teeth never stop growing. If their teeth keep growing and they don't chew on things, they might even grow into the top of their mouth, which would be very painful and disruptive for the animal.
Well guys, we hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about skulls and how to ID them. Comment below any skulls that you've come across in your hikes while being home, and we can't wait to see you when we reopen again here at the Kansas City Zoo.